The year is 1945. The Third Reich is collapsing in flames, its leaders scrambling for survival as Berlin burns around them. As the Nazi Empire dies, its most powerful figures meet their ends. Not in glorious last stands or heroic defiance, but in ways that are often pathetic, ironic, humiliating, and far from the grand Wagnerian finale they had imagined for themselves. Welcome to the dark, undignified final chapters of the men who once ruled Europe with terror. Today, we're exposing the most embarrassing, botched, and ironic deaths of the Nazi high command, the moments they desperately try to hide from history. Let's begin with the man who wanted to die like a warrior, but ended up looking like a coward in his own bunker. Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Minister of Propaganda and the Master of Lies, served as Chancellor for exactly 1 day after Hitler's suicide. Goebbels and his wife Magda refused to live in a world without National Socialism. In the final hours in the Vorbunker, they made a horrific decision. They would not let their 6 young children survive. Magda first had an SS dentist inject all 6 children with morphine to put them to sleep. Once the children were unconscious in their beds, she went from room to room, forcing a glass cyanide capsule into each small mouth and crushing it between their teeth. All 6 died from cyanide poisoning while unconscious. After murdering their own children, Joseph and Magda Goebbels walked up the bunker stairs into the garden. Joseph shot Magda, then turned the gun on himself. Their bodies were partially burned by SS guards, but remained identifiable. The propaganda minister who had spent years glorifying death chose to end his entire family rather than face defeat. His children became some of the last victims of the Third Reich, a final, horrifying act of loyalty to a dying ideology. Hermann Göring, Hitler's designated successor and commander of the Luftwaffe, was sentenced to death by hanging at the Nuremberg trials. Göring had no intention of letting the Allies have the satisfaction of executing him publicly. Somehow, he managed to smuggle a cyanide capsule hidden inside a hollowed-out brass bullet casing into his maximum security cell. Guards never discovered how he obtained it, or who helped him. On the night before his scheduled hanging, Göring crushed the glass capsule between his teeth and died within minutes, a mocking smile frozen on his face. He had robbed the victorious Allies of their grand spectacle. His suicide note showed zero remorse, only defiance. The flamboyant Reichsmarshal, who once strutted in lavish uniforms, died alone in a prison cell, cheating the noose at the last second. The man who loved theatrical displays left the world in a quiet, solitary act of cowardice. Then there was Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the German High Command, who had signed the unconditional surrender. At the Nuremberg, he was convicted of war crimes and sentenced to hang. The execution was supposed to be swift and clinical. It was anything but. The American executioner, Master Sergeant John C. Woods, severely miscalculated the drop. When Keitel fell through the trapdoor, his face smashed violently into the edge of the opening. The impact tore his face open. The drop failed to break his neck cleanly. Keitel hung there, bleeding profusely, slowly strangling for a full 24 minutes. Witnesses described the scene as gruesome and botched. The man who helped orchestrate years of war died in one of the most undignified, prolonged hanging of the Nuremberg executions, a final humiliation for a general who had demanded absolute obedience from millions. Julius Streicher, the rabidly anti-Semitic publisher of Der Stürmer, was the only Nuremberg defendant who went to the gallows kicking and screaming. He had to be physically dragged and strapped down. Standing on the trapdoor, he glared at the witnesses and screamed, "Pudem fest 1946, a final anti-Semitic taunt. When the trapdoor opened, the drop was botched again. Streicher's neck didn't break. He thrashed and groaned violently under the platform. The executioner had to climb down and physically pull on his legs to finish the job. Streicher's death was slow, painful, and humiliating, a grotesque end for a man who had spent years spreading hatred and calling for the extermination of others. Reinhard Heydrich, the butcher of Prague and one of the main architects of the Holocaust, met perhaps the most ironic death of all. On May 27, 1942, Czech resistance fighters attacked his open-top Mercedes with an anti-tank grenade. The blast didn't kill him instantly. He was rushed to a hospital. The explosion had driven fragments of the car's luxury horsehair upholstery deep into his spleen. That contaminated horsehair full of bacteria caused a massive infection. Antibiotics were not yet widely available. Heydrich suffered 4 days in absolute agony as sepsis ravaged his body. The man who helped engineer the murder of millions ultimately died from an infection caused by the fancy interior of his own car. The materials meant for comfort became the weapon that killed him. A cruelly poetic end for one of the coldest bureaucrats of the Nazi regime. Roland Freisler, the fanatical hanging judge of T-People escort, who had sentenced thousands to death with screaming tirades, met his end in almost poetic fashion. On February 3, 1945, while presiding over a treason trial, American bombers attacked Berlin. Everyone rushed to the shelters. Freisler, however, stopped to gather his case files. He wanted to make sure the defendants would still be executed. After the raid, a bomb scored a direct hit on the courthouse. The ceiling collapsed, and a massive masonry beam crushed Freisler's skull. He was found dead in the rubble, still clutching the bloody execution files in his hands. The judge who had sent so many to their deaths was killed by Allied bombs while trying to protect his paperwork. A final, ironic justice. Heinrich Himmler, the chief of the SS and the principal architect of the Holocaust, tried to flee disguised as a lowly sergeant, wearing a fake eye patch. British forces captured him at a checkpoint. During a medical examination, a doctor noticed a small dark object lodged between Himmler's lower teeth. When the doctor reached in, Himmler violently jerked his head away and crushed the hidden cyanide capsule. He died in 15 minutes. His face distorted from the poison. The man who oversaw the machinery of genocide escaped justice by biting down on a glass vial like a cornered rat. A pathetic, undignified end for one of the most feared figures of the regime. And then there's the most pathetic of them all. Rudolf Hess Hitler, as former deputy, has spent 40 years in solitary confinement at Spandau prison as the last remaining prisoner. At age 93, nearly blind and frail, he walked into a small summer house in the prison garden, wrapped an electrical cord around his neck, and hanged himself from a window latch. Immediately after his body was removed, the Allies demolished the entire prison and dumped the rubble into the North Sea. To prevent it from becoming a neo-Nazi shrine, the man who once flew to Scotland hoping to negotiate peace died alone after 4 decades of isolation. His final prison destroyed to erase his memory. These were the men who once held Europe in terror. Yet when the end came, many died not in flames of glory or heroic defiance, but in bunkers, prison cells, rubble, and quiet corners. Scared, broken, and painfully human after all. Their deaths were often small, undignified, and laced with bitter irony. The grand architects of the Third Reich didn't go down in Wagnerian glory. They died in ways that exposed their fear, their fragility, and their ultimate failure. Goebbels murdered his own children rather than let them live without the regime he worshipped. Göring cheated the noose with a smuggled pill. Keitel and Streicher suffered botched, agonizing hangings. Heydrich was killed by the luxury upholstery of his own car. Freisler was crushed while clutching execution papers. Himmler bit down on poison like a trapped animal. Hess ended his life after decades of solitary confinement, his prison erased from existence. These deaths weren't noble or dramatic. They were messy, cowardly, and often absurd. A far cry from the mythic image the Nazis tried to project. They remind us that even the most powerful men, when stripped of their power, are just frightened humans facing the consequences of their actions. The next time you hear someone romanticize the Nazi leadership, remember how most of them actually left this world, not as legends, but as frightened men desperately trying to escape the consequences of their own actions. If this video changed how you see these figures, drop a comment below. Which death surprised you the most? And if you want more stories like this, hit like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.